welcome to another edition of Strategic Moves with Lou. I'm Mike Hendren. I'm a licensed real estate agent here in Wichita Falls, Texas with Strategic Realty. And here with me, of course, is Lou Italis, the owner-broker of Strategic Realty. Lou, how have you been this week?
Hi. Good.
Yeah, well, good.
So far, so good.
So far, can't complain, right?
Yeah, it's getting a little chilly out there, but it's not.
Don't worry, it'll warm up.
Yeah, every day it's a mystery what it's going to come out with.
This is Wichita Falls. It's heater in the morning, air conditioning in the afternoon. That's the way it is.
I remember one day it was like 20 degrees in the morning at the crack of dawn, and then by the middle of the day it was like 90 degrees. It gives you a little bit of whiplash.
I was having a conversation with a friend recently, and years ago he knew a guy in the Dallas area that owned some dry cleaners.
Uh-huh.
And the guy had owned 27 or 28 different dry cleaning operations in the state of New Jersey at one time. And he sold his entire operation in New Jersey to move to Dallas to be closer to his son and his grandchildren. And he said in 28 plus 30 plus years in the business, he'd never seen anything like it. People in Dallas would, it's the middle of February and people come in with coats in one hand and short sleeve shirts in the other to get clean. He's like, couldn't believe it, how the wild swings in the weather.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, the day that we're recording this show, we're probably going to hit a record high today of 80 degrees in Wichita Falls. For this day in December, because we're recording this on the 9th of December.
Mm-hmm.
And we're supposed to hit a record high today of 80. The old record was 79, and that was set in 1929. So we're breaking a nearly century-old record. Yeah, wow. I mean, that's crazy. Welcome to North Texas. You don't like the weather? Literally, it'll change in a few minutes. Yeah, it'll change. So anyway, we didn't come here to talk about the weather, although that is an important factor for people looking to relocate. If you're looking for a new place to call home, sometimes weather is a factor. Some people don't want to live in a climate that's cold, and some people don't want to live in a climate that's hot.
Some people don't want to move when it's cold outside.
No.
Or when it's too hot outside. Although I think of the two, I would probably prefer for it to be cold, because when you're moving, you're already, like, your blood is super pumpy. Yeah. And, that's my clinical term.
That's just super pumpy.
Super pumpy. And it's easier for somebody to, go in and out of the car and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more comfortable. In the in the summer, it's just miserably hot.
Well, here it is. I mean, we can get oppressively hot here. Although the last few summers here have been quite mild and bearable.
Mm-hmm. Well, like for moving purposes, because that hot air, when you're already overheated and you're moving boxes and stuff like that, it can be pretty intense. Although most people do wind up moving in the summer anyway, because that's when kids are out of school and
it's a little more convenient logistically.
It's a little bit more convenient, but in the winter, I think that I would prefer to move in the winter.
I think it really kind of depends on where you're moving. If you're moving to Minnesota,
probably not a good idea to move in the winter.
To Wichita Falls.
Yeah.
We want you to come to Wichita Falls, though.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to move to South Dakota in the winter.
Well, a lot of military folks have if they were stationed at Shepherd Air Force Base, which for those of you that don't live here, Shepherd Air Force Base is the large military base here. It's the largest Euro-NATO Joint Jet Pilot Training Program base in the world, and almost everybody who serves in the Air Force at one point in time in their career, they're going to be at Shepherd.
Yeah, because this is a training base.
Exactly, and a lot of military personnel that have been here before relocate to Wichita Falls upon retirement because they've been here, they love the climate here, and maybe they're from Minnesota or they're from someplace that was really cold and miserable.
Yeah, we do get a lot of retirees that's come back here.
We sure do, and so it's a great place. It's a great place to call home, whether you're 30 or 70. It doesn't matter. It's a great place to call home.
And we're in a little tiny bubble as far as real estate is concerned, according to the state of Texas. I mean, basically, our property values. Normally, like lately, it's been a little bit crazy, but not nearly as crazy as it would be in Dallas-Fort Worth or even Austin or any of those major metropolitan areas.
Nothing like Austin.
We kind of stay in between a happy medium. Our property values never double overnight, and they don't lose 50% overnight either.
Right.
So we kind of just stay in this happy little, everything goes up about 5% every year, and it's pretty steady in that aspect.
We've had a very stable population for decades, and by stable, and some people would call stagnant even. We were about 96,000 people 65, 70 years ago. We're about 100. Our official number is somewhere around 106. I think we're actually closer to 108, 109 now. I don't think the census numbers that we're going to get back are going to be 100% accurate, because last year was such just a mess in terms of the census.
Poopy show.
Yeah.
I was gonna say it.
Yeah.
I caught myself.
We're a little bit, I hate to say it, but we have been kind of flat population-wise. And that's a double-edged sword in some ways. In some ways, it has helped us because I think that has played a role in keeping some of those real estate prices fairly stable compared to other parts of the state.
Right. And last week we had talked about the art of negotiation, and kind of like we had kind of started to talk about it, and we really hadn't gotten too far into it, but that also has an effect on the type of investors and the type of buyers that we get here in Wichita Falls for investment style properties, because a lot of the people that are in Fort Worth, Austin, or even other states see our prices as the lowest. Like, so for instance, if you have an REO pop up, you can buy a house here in Wichita Falls for less than $100,000 and still have a decent house. And so that's very attractive to investors, because you can't find anything down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area for less than $100,000. It's just not possible. And if you are, it's just like such a POS that nobody, it's just a tear down, basically, in other words. So whenever they see our prices, you can buy a house on the 8th Street or 9th Street for $50,000, $60,000, or at least it used to be. Now it's gotten a little bit more competitive in that sense. So we get a lot of investors coming up here and buying up a lot of these properties, thinking that they are, getting a really good price on a property, which... Yes, but then they think that they can turn around and do the same thing that they do in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is buy a property for $150,000, fix it up a little bit, and then turn around and sell it for $300,000. It doesn't work that way in Wichita Falls.
No, it's
not.
not.
I hate to break it to a lot of these investors, is if you buy a property here for $50,000, more than likely you're only going to see a 10 to 15% increase or gain out of that property, because it's just the way we are. I mean, if you fix it up and you put $20,000, $30,000 into it, you're not going to be able to sell that $50,000 property for more than $100,000.
Right.
It's just because it has to do with the actual housing area itself too. And
that's where the negotiation part comes in.
Right.
When you're looking at buying an investment property,
really have to depend on the comps.
You depend on the comps. You got to look at what's the market going to bear. I mean, you can't compare Wichita Falls to Dallas. You can't compare Wichita Falls to Lubbock.
No. Our $50,000 house here would be worth $150,000 anywhere else.
Yeah,
and you can't expect those kinds of gains that you would in that area as you would here, because it's just not sustainable.
Well, but it's this way everywhere. Let's take for example, because we've got some really nice homes in Wichita Falls.
Oh yeah.
You take a $500,000 home here.
Easily, and that's $1 million anywhere else.
Oh yeah, a $500,000 home here is a really nice home.
Yeah.
You pick up that $500,000 home and move it to the West Coast, it's $1.5 million all day long.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
And that's.
I helped my sister buy a house in California, and she paid almost $1 million for this house.
Yeah.
And the house is about the size of mine.
Yeah.
And it's 1,400 square feet or so. Maybe a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
1,400 square feet with a pool.
Yeah.
And she paid $1 million, and I paid $150,000 for mine.
Yeah, I mean that's like I paid about $155, $165 for mine, and that same house, you pick it up and again move it almost anywhere else in the country, West Coast, East Coast, Austin area, 2.5, 3, 4 times the price, depending on where you go with it.
And that's kind of to further on that is that kind of messes up, because when you get people from out of town coming to our market here, and they make offers on a property, they're making offers thinking that of prices down there in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Yeah. They're thinking, okay, well, it's listed for 55, so let's offer for 60 and see if it goes. Well, yeah, it's going to go because you're offering more than asking. Well, I say that, but just in, let's just go with it. It might go, but meanwhile, an actual investor that's here in Wichita Falls says $50,000 for a house that I would only pay $20,000 for, and so they can never compete with the out of state investors, or out of Wichita Falls investors, because that price is not worth it.
And I think probably an investor, a Texas-based investor, let's say Dallas is 2 hours down the road from us.
Right.
A Dallas investor is going to have a little bit better perspective on the pulse of the market here, especially if they've done business here before.
Right.
They're going to have a better impression of the market than someone from, say, L.A. or San Francisco or anywhere on the West Coast for that matter. They're going to have a little bit better read on the market, perhaps. So they're going to be a little bit better able, I would think, especially if they've done business here before, to negotiate. But that whole negotiation process is so important, especially if you're an investor. You got to buy it right, and you got to know. We'll see a lot of investors, for example, they'll buy a property here and they don't have inspections done. They don't go through that process. Usually they're buying for cash. So they come in, they buy a property for, let's say, $60,000 cash. They got to be able to look at that property, go through it, walk through it, or have someone do it for them. If they can't get to the area to do it, they got to have someone they can trust to go in and do that for them, and kind of get a read on how much am I going to put into this house. Sometimes it's more than just carpet and paint to make it right. That's
another big difference too, is that, for instance, I work for Fannie Mae on the REOs. They'll have their vendors, they call them vendors. They'll buy a house, or they'll be getting ready to list a house, and the first thing that they do is they go and inspect it, and they get they get some sort of estimate of what it would cost to rehab this house.
Right.
And they'll send somebody down from the Dallas-Fort Worth area to do it, because that's their vendors. My shirt's falling apart apparently. That's where their vendors are from. So they'll get somebody from down there, and they'll say, oh, well, it's going to need a new roof. That's going to be $15,000, and it's going to need a new foundation, and that's going to be another $15,000. And they come up with these prices, and then I have to tell them, no, it's not going to cost $15,000. It's only going to cost maybe $120,000 a square on the roof. So that's only going to be like $7,000 for a new roof. So our prices, as far as like the cost of labor and material here, is even cheaper than the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, yes, you might be able to buy a house here for $100,000. Our labor is a little bit cheaper as well, so that you might not have quite as much of an overhead going into it. But the problem isn't that so much. It's the resale value.
Well, and it's, now you say the labor's cheaper and all. The same the same inflationary pressures that are affecting the rest of the country are affecting us. Lumber cost. Now we've seen that come down dramatically. That 2x4 that was $7.50 6 months ago is now a little closer to $3.50. It's gotten a little. Last time I checked, anyway, it may be a little cheaper than that now. It's come back down to earth.
It's come down. Not quite as bad. Not quite as bad as it used to be, but it's still a little bit more inflated. And I think that we might actually see a tick of it going back up if our supply chain continues to struggle.
Well, you take this on a very local level here. So we have some major construction projects in the pipeline commercially here. We've got 2 brand new high schools that are going to be under construction soon here in Wichita Falls. We've got new businesses coming to town. And there are, that I can think of for sure, and this is working off information from the Chamber of Commerce, probably 3 or 4 major projects, including the 2 high schools, that will start in the next several months. That puts stresses on the labor side of it as far as the construction labor, which is already struggling with getting people to work. I mean, that's all over the country.
That's another thing that we could also use here in Wichita Falls is a lot more labor.
Yeah, well,
because I think that would alleviate. Because, like, so for instance, if you're in construction, you obviously know that you're booked 2 or 3 months in advance already.
Yes.
I mean, I can't call up a guy and be like, "Hey, I need this done over at this house. Can you go over there now and take care of it?" I mean, very few times can I actually do that. So the amount of actual skilled labor, but the problem with the reason why we don't have a lot of people here working is because they come here, they work for a few months, and then they go down to the Dallas-Fort Worth area because they can make so much more money than they could here in Wichita Falls. Wichita Falls, our labor rates on things like roofing and construction is pretty low.
Well, it's better than it used to be. I mean, I can tell you, it's the wages have improved here somewhat organically over the last couple of years.
Yes, but not nearly. I mean, still, you're not going to pay more than, let's say $15 an hour for a construction standpoint. You're not going to pay more than, actually, probably not more than $12 an hour.
Well, I think it's never gonna be. It's always been, the wages have always been higher in the larger markets because by virtue of the fact that you've got more competition. Yeah. For that labor, you've got more,
But see, that's the thing is that it's all driven by supply and demand, right?
Sure it is, yeah.
Well, our supply is so low and our demand is so high. Yeah. You would think that would make some difference in the price that it costs to get things done, but it doesn't really. When it comes to not when it comes to construction.
No, it hasn't. I don't think we've seen the impact that it's had maybe in the Dallas area or in the San Antonio area or the Houston area. We haven't seen that kind of impact here yet. Mm-hmm. But I think, and again, going back to the negotiation part of this, when you're buying, well, even when you're going to be the homeowner and you're going to buy a property, and a lot of people will do this, they'll buy a house that they know they're going to have to invest some money in. Mm-hmm. They know it's got some issues. And so, the first negotiation you have is with the seller,
I think that the major cost for investors, if you're going to buy a house here in Wichita Falls and you're going to put $20,000-$30,000 into it, you're not going to lose money. It's not going to cost you more for the labor than it would just in time. So, for instance, the construction people will be like, okay, I can do it for this price and give you a really good price, but I can't do it for another 2 months. So you're going to be sitting on that property for 2 months. So the only thing that it's going to cost you as an investor is time. Yeah,
and that's one thing you're not really going to be able to negotiate on so aggressively in a market like this is the time frame of when it's going to get done. It is what it is. If you're a drywall contractor and you've got a crew of 12 people and you've got 15 or 20 jobs in the pipeline, you're not going to push one of your other customers to the back of the line to take somebody, even if they offer you more money in general. You're probably not going to do that.
Our word means.
Yeah, the timeline is what the timeline is, and I've encountered people like that they would be willing to pay more for the labor. They would be willing to pay more to have the job done if they could just get bumped up the list. And that generally around here doesn't happen.
Not very much, not unless you really. And then by then it's not really cost saving. Then
no, Then it becomes, for those people that the money's not the issue, it's the time. Right. Well, there's not really a lot of room to negotiate on the time. It is what it is. If the contractor says, look, I can't get to you for 60 days. I just had that with a client that's having a fence built. Mm-hmm. And 60 days. I mean, he's got 20 or 25 other jobs already in the pipeline and can't get to them for, 2 months. And that's not something you like to hear, but it is what it is. And that's a reflection of the time we're living in. Most contractors are very, very busy.
Okay. Fraud alert. Don't give anybody any money, any contractor here in Wichita Falls, your friend, your in-laws, or somebody that you just met. don't give them any money until they start the job, and only give them enough money for them to purchase the materials, maybe, and not more than 50% of the final job.
Yeah,
I don't know how many times I've talked to investors or new investors, and it usually happens to new investors because they're a little bit less savvy on how this works.
Yeah.
They'll pay, somebody tells them, oh, it's going to cost us $2,000 to get this flooring in. I need, so here's the bill. And they pay it, and then their contractor is bye-bye. And I don't know how many times that happens. So if you are hiring somebody to do a job, don't give them any money, or definitely don't pay the bill until the job is complete. And if you do give them money, not more than 50% of the job, so that they can get materials. And if you can be in that position to do so, go buy the materials yourself.
Lou, I have seen more complaints, and usually, with social media now, that's usually the first place people go when they've got a gripe now, is they go to social media and they start blasting somebody. But I've seen more people on social media complaining about that. I paid contractor X, this price to do the job. They came in, they did this much work, and they haven't
completed it.
They haven't been back in 2 weeks.
And they've already been paid. It breaks my heart, because you should never, ever, ever do that.
And I think that's been happening more in the last year. I think there's just, unfortunately, there are some unscrupulous people out here that have taken advantage of the situation. They know that there are some folks that need a job done, and they're willing to pay. They just want to pay somebody to come do it. They don't care. They just want it done.
There's so many more businesses that have started up in this last couple of months, or this last couple of years, in construction, that you really have to be careful about who you use and who you trust. You really need to, most real estate agents are going to have a handyman in their pocket. They're going to know certain contractors, and they're going to know the ones to trust. Well, so if you have an issue, or if you have something that you want to do in your house, even if you're not going to buy or sell the property, just give a real estate agent a call, or give me, give somebody at Strategic Realty a call, or give me a call if you want, because inevitably I do know people, and I do know who you can trust to do the job and not rip you off.
Yeah.
I was trying to be, I was trying to think of a considerate word on that, because that's the hard part, is that you can get ripped off. And there are people out there that are doing construction that are not reliable, or that do crappy work.
Now that said,
aren't experienced enough to do the job properly. And then you wind up having to hire a contractor twice, because now you got somebody that went in there and did a job, and looks like poo-poo.
Well,
and now you got to buy another. You have to hire another contractor to fix it. Yeah. So you really want to talk to somebody that you can trust. And we were supposed to be talking about, the art of negotiation, and we've already gone on a tangent.
Well, and that's sad about contract. There are a lot of really good contractors out there, reputable people.
There are.
With
I'm not
great
saying that
reputations.
All of them are like that, but.
And they do great work, and they come with great references, and that is the mark of a great contractor, by the way. If you ask for references and they can't give you any or won't give you any, that's a red flag. Most good, reputable, solid contractors in any field, if you ask for a reference, they're going to give them to you, and they're not going to have a problem with you picking up the phone and calling that reference and going, hey, can you give me, how did they work for you? How did it work out for you? Did they do great work for you?
They
won't have a problem telling you.
And was it satisfactory?
Right.
Yeah, so that's a big problem here in Wichita Falls, and you really need to beware. It's buyer beware.
Yeah. Well, now, back to the negotiation though side of things.
Okay.
So when you are looking at purchasing a home, whether you're an investor or whether you're buying your forever home, or you're buying the home you're going to live in for the next 7 years, which I think is still kind of the average people live in a home. It's about 7 years or so. Whatever your situation is that you're in, negotiation's very important, and usually hopefully you're working with an agent, and that negotiation is going through your agent. You've got an agent as a buyer, the seller's got an agent as a buyer normally. But sometimes you'll also have an intermediary relationship that you're working
Correct.
with.
Like I'll have a listing and then somebody reaches out to me directly to purchase the property.
Right.
And that's perfectly acceptable. You don't need to have your own agent. You can reach out to the listing company. I encourage it because a lot of times they are going to be a little bit more in the know.
Yep.
And some people feel like, though, that they need to have another agent to represent them because they feel like they're going to get better representation in that instance. And I mean, it really is, 6 or half a dozen. It can go both ways. The art of negotiation, as far as I'm concerned, is really going to be subjective because every situation is a little bit different. So, for instance, if you're buying an estate home, there's going to be some emotion in that sale, or at least I think there might be. There could be no emotion as well, but typically there's going to be some emotion to the sale, especially if that was a home that they grew up in, and their parents passed away. And so you're going to have a little bit less. And I mean, I hate to say it, but there tends to be a little bit more greed involved in that. Sometimes they're, the heirs just want to get rid of it and they don't care what they sell it for. And then you'll get that one sibling that says, no, it's worth X, Y, Z, and we're not going to sell it for less than this. And so you can't make that transaction go through smoothly because you got that one. But there is a happy medium at some point. So we were talking about it not on air, and we were talking about people that lowball offer.
Yeah.
I get it. You're trying to see what somebody is, if somebody's desperate enough to sell the property, but and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. And that's, I think, why a lot of investors will do that. They'll just shoot all these lowball offers out there without really a lot of consideration as to what the situation is.
I think sometimes investors will do that. They'll look at a property and they see that it's been on the market for, 4 months or 6 months or whatever. And I
got one on that, on one of my listings. They gave him an offer of, I think it was like $60,000 less than what it was listed for. And he was like, well, it needs this much work to it, so I'm offering this much. And I'm like, well, then you're not going to buy it.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
I had one like that recently.
They're not going to entertain something like that, especially when it's that far from the list price. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't offer 5, 10, 15, 20%, even 20% below the average, the list price is a reasonable offer. Anything below 20%, if you try to get closer to 50%, then it's just, people aren't that desperate.
Well, and and this is where you have to be careful in this negotiation process and in making these offers. You also run the risk when you make a really low ball offer of angering the seller to the point that they just shut down on you.
They don't want to negotiate at that point. So now you've talked yourself out of a contract.
Exactly.
Literally.
So it does happen. Sometimes the offer is so, they feel like it's such an insultingly low number, they just shut down on you.
Especially when you don't have anything to back up your claim.
Yes.
So, for instance, a lot of my investors, I advise them, listen, it's listed for $55,000.
Yep.
You're going to get an option period, or what it's called in the commercial business, a feasibility period. You're going to get an option period to do your due diligence and get your inspection done.
Yes.
Well, if you have an inspector go out there and tell you, oh, the foundation is bonkers and the roof needs to be replaced and and it's got termite damage, then you have something that you can present to a seller, and you have evidence of an issue that would create a problem for the seller to sell their property.
Yes.
So now you've given them a reason. But if you're just coming in and giving them a 50% below asking offer without any real something to back it up with, the buyer is just not going to even consider that. But if you come to them and say, hey, we got into contract on the list price, but we did our inspections and we found XYZ. It's going to cost us $15,000 to fix XYZ. Would you take a $15,000 reduction on the sales price in lieu of those repairs? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to get some happy medium. They may not give you $15,000 off, but they'll give you somewhere around 8 or 10.
8, 9, 10, yeah.
Yeah, you never know. You just never know at that point. And that's a better offer strategy.
Right.
That's a better strategy to come with than just shooting throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what's going to stick.
See if it sticks.
Because you're wasting time. You're wasting my time. You're wasting your time. You're wasting a seller's time. Yeah. So, if you actually come to this and say, okay, well, if I was to pay this, how much do I need to fix it up to get it to where I can sell it for this?
True.
And you do your due diligence during that option period. And that option period, usually it only costs like $50 or $100 or whatever to, get that 10-day option period or 7-day option, however many days you ask for.
Right.
A seller is going to be willing to give you that time in order to do your due diligence. So during that time, you have your contractor go out, you have your roofer go out, or you just go and get an inspection and period. And yes, it does cost a little money. It's like $400 to get an inspection.
Could be the best $400 you've ever spent.
Well, and then it could say, if you go and get an inspection done and he tells you it's going to, that it's got this problem, this problem, this problem, and then you get a contractor out there to go and take a look at those problems, tell you how much it's going to cost to fix it, and then turn around and get the seller to kind of help contribute to those repairs, it's going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars because you could get them effectively to pay for it.
Right.
And so that's my negotiation strategy when it comes to most properties is I'm not going to try and on the offset try to haggle you down on the price until I know what it needs to be repaired.
Well, we got a lot more we could talk about with this, but we're out of time.
Okay.
We're a little out of time. So anyway, we will reserve that for another episode of Strategic Moves with Lou. If you are looking to buy or sell a home, we would love to help you do that. It's Strategic Realty, Wichita Falls, Texas. Online, strategicrealty.net, and the phone number is
940-689-7900.
That's right. And again, strategicrealty.net. We would love to hear from you. Until next time, take care. We'll see you down the road with another episode of Strategic Moves with Lou.